two or three different houses there in Carmel, and even were so affluent at times as to hire a servant to serve the evening meal.
Was it because rent was inexpensive, or did you own the house?
No, the rents were pretty low at that time, Paul. I don't remember what we paid, but they were certainly pretty low. I mean, Carmel hadn't really caught on at all like it has now, like it had later on. Became, of course, immensely attractive to any number of people who wanted to get up to Carmel. So, actually, I was there in the kind of heyday of Carmel party life, which didn't have a heck of a lot to do with my drawing and painting, I must say. But I did become a member of the Carmel Art Association in 1940, and so now I'm an honorary life member.
They must have started painting sometime before 1940, huh?
Well, actually, see, what happened, Paul, was when I was down in Los Angeles, I used to go to Chenard's, and I didn't go there as a regular student. I got in on a new drawing class, life model, and I was put in there at the rate of 10 cents an hour because the Chenards had advertised that they had a kind of class with no teacher, and I was the only one who answered the ad, and they didn't have any place to put me, so I had instruction there for 3 or 4 months under a very good teacher by the name of Donald Graham. Really became quite well known. So that went on for 3 or 4 months, and finally the office called me in and said, we decided to discontinue the 10 cents an hour quick sketch class. However, at that time I went down to Long Beach and got on the aircraft business. I also attended some live classes down there, where I had a couple of lady teachers by the name of Pauline Peavy and Pansy Jackson, respectively.
So did you go back to Long Beach for financial reasons, or?
No, I didn't really go back. I was down Long Beach. I didn't go back there many places. I just lived there for a while when I was in the aircraft business. And once I saw about my interests, I headed for Carmel.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Would you say that living in this area affected your art? You know, your approach to art? Did you start out painting seascapes?
Well, of course. I mean, the area itself, has affected my art, a great deal, because I happen to do a lot of landscape and seascape paintings, and so this is a great place for that sort of thing. Of course, is one reason why so many of the artists came here, especially in the early days. Most people like Armin Hansen, John O'Shea, and William Ritchell, McComas, they were the kind of founding fathers of the Carmel Art Association, and very strong on personal imagery. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that that was the best time in Carmel art, actually, when those people were in Carmel and exhibiting at the Carmel Art Association.
Was there art avant-garde? I don't know anything about their art.
Well, I don't. Such terms as avant-garde, I don't think ever penetrated through the Carmel community particularly.
Okay.
And by now, I think just about everything is done, you see, that can be done, so it's pretty hard to have an avant-garde when the only thing that really, as far as I'm concerned, really makes any difference is your individual imagery, which may be expressed through different skills. I've never been a part of any particular school of art, as far as I know.
What other types of work have you had to do to kind of make ends meet while you were getting started in the arts?
Yeah, I know. As you know, I drove the taxi, and I also worked at Holman's bookstore for off and on for a number of years. I'm just trying to think of other jobs that I may have had, but I even worked for Michael Frank very shortly until he found out I couldn't handle the figures as well as he wanted me to. Or whatever I was doing. Reconciling the check account, that's what I was doing.
When you talk about Holman's, are you talking about Holman's department store in PG?
Yes, that's right. Holman's at that time was well, as you know, it's quite a family store. I guess it still is, even though the name has changed. But the book department was a lease. It was a lease-out thing. It was actually the Walden Book Company. Of course, Walden is one of the largest book chains in the United States.
When were you actually starting to make an income from your art?
Well, Paul, that's pretty hard to tell about that. See, I've had an income from the art for, maybe 10 or 20 years, but it's just fairly recently that's become, more successful, shall we say, that way.
I remember once at the cab stand, you told me this great story, I hope that you can remember it, about during the war you got hired as a camouflage artist?
Oh, yes, that's true. Yeah, that's right, Paul. See, one of the, the camouflage department was under the U.S. Corps of Army Engineers. At that time, in San Francisco, the department, and during that Second World War, the department was run by an artist from Carmel by the name of Paul Whitman. Now, everybody that was in that camouflage department upstairs designing the camouflage plans, they were all artists. Every darn doggone one of them. That included, one of the members of the Society of Six was Louis Segras, and he was up there. Now there's another guy named Rex Brandt who's still alive, and he functions down there near Laguna Beach. I haven't seen him since the time, but my job was outside. One of our particular jobs was camouflaging a radar installation up near Fort Bragg in Northern California. I thought the whole project was kind of silly because I can't imagine it. Anyhow, it went so far, we set up a farm at this radar installation. Of course, there was a great big pole we call a Christmas tree, and that was the antenna, and that stuck straight up for a matter of maybe 100 feet, so that was not very easily disguised. We went out and we bought some old houses and put them back together up there on the side of this radar installation. I even went so far as to get a dozen white leghorn chickens to run around the chicken yard. You can imagine a Japanese coming in the bomber place looking down. Oh, yeah, no, that's no place. White chickens, yeah. Oh.
Things I remember from the cab stand is you told me about during the camouflaging of that place, you had an inspiration to put up a clothesline or something like that?
Yes, I did. I put up this clothesline, and I went down to the local department store and got a pair of white well, they weren't BB, the Union suit. So I hung that on the clothesline too, which of course was very important in helping to deceive the Japanese, who happily enough never got there.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask you to do it all over again. Okay.
You what?
Put the hat back down a little bit.
Oh, all right, sure.
And I'm going to ask you to tell the story again. Okay. When I ask you the question, put the hat back.
Yeah, all right, sure, you bet.
So tell me about the clothesline.
Oh, the clothesline episode was to kind of complete the authenticity of the farm. I went down to the Union department store in Fort Bragg, and I got a white Union suit, which I hung on the clothesline. So I'm sure that was very effective in keeping the Japanese really confused about the fact that that was a radar installation.
Okay, great. Thank you. How about a story from Joe's Taxis? Do you have a favorite Joe's Taxi story? From your years of driving or your years of dispatching?
Well, I drove, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure how long, but anyhow, when I started out, the taxi stand was on Junipero Street, and the lady who was running it was Florence Rivas, who is really a marvelous person, and the center of, she would get up very late every day and come up to the cab stand, then she was there till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And that cab stand was filled with some mangy old couches. You didn't see it, I guess, ever, but then. And, oh yes. Besides that, there was a sink, of course, a kitchen and a sink, but inasmuch as the drain to the sink underneath the house had been disconnected, so everything that went down the sink went up underneath the place and got to being rather smelly back there. And as an adjunct to that particular kitchen, there was the room they kept extra, automobile parts to put in the cabs when they broke down. So that was quite a jumble of stuff there. Some of we drivers could come in and sit down on one of those couches and be asleep in 10 minutes or less.
Is there a particular story that you might remember with a customer or somebody in front?
No, doggone it, Paul. I mean, I should. Well, I do remember one story, which is in my book, Tales of the Taxi Cab. There was a lady living out on the Carmel Point, and she had the story that, and she stuck with it too, that Thomas Edison was really a Mexican, and his name had been Thomas de Alva. And she claimed that there was a plaque in front of his house down in this town of Mexico saying Thomas de Alva. And Thomas de Alva had gone up somehow or another on a railroad car, and somebody had become interested in him. Apparently he was doing chemical experiments. Become interested in him, and he went back to, where was it that Edison?
Menlo Park? I think he was Menlo Park, New York, or Menlo Park.
Menlo?
He was known as the the genius of Menlo Park, but I
Oh,
know it's
really?
Menlo Park, California.
I'll be darned. I didn't know there was one back there. Well, anyhow, this, according to my friend Pelly, her name was Pelly Martinez, that was none other than a Mexican by the name of Thomas D. Alva.
Who invented the light bulb?
That's right, but I think this is a very peculiar story because, after all, there must be some recordings of Edison's voice, and I doubt very much if he could remove his Mexican accent from his spoken English.
Regular cab customer?
Oh, yeah, Pelly was a regular customer, you bet. Yeah, that's right. Her husband had been a very well-known artist up in the Bay Area by the name of Xavier Martinez.
Well, let me ask you about the process of paintings. I mean, describe for me the process of painting. You stretch your
Well,
own
it's pretty
canvas?
hard, Paul, to make a process of painting, but you see, my approach actually is, I think it is, empathetic. In other words, I had tried to establish a bond between myself and the subject matter, whatever it is. So that's why I have written somewhere, I am the oak tree on the hill, the rock and the breaking wave. But anyhow, I mean, that may be a little bit pretentious, but that is really the basis. I mean, that's where I get my info. Actually, I felt the same way because I've done a lot of drawing and painting in Colorado, for instance, and up around Aspen, too. And I kind of miss not getting back there. You change of scenery once in a while.
You know, how about the mechanics of painting? Do you start from a sketch? Do you go right to canvas? Do you make a lot of changes?
Oh, well, all right, Paul, sure. I make a sketch, and I always make a sketch, which is done with a fairly soft pencil and barrel number 314 to be exact, and I also use a gum eraser in case I need to make any corrections. Now, what I work on is nearly always the same. It's 140-pound Arches rough, and we say Arches, actually, it's Darsh, but there are not many people who are going to get a hold of that French pronunciation, so it's easier just to say Arches 140-pound rough. There are all sorts of different weights of papers and different, whether they're
textures,
smooth or have a lot of holes in them or indentations. The idea of a rough paper, I mean, if you move a brush quickly over rough paper, some of the spots will be white still. I mean, in other words, that enables the artist to perhaps leave, a few white spots showing, which actually gives life to the rest of the paint, the color. That's the object of using a rough paper.
And then you apply paint right to that paper?
Oh, sure, sure. You see, these papers are already sized, so the paint does not sink in. They are, for the most, all really good professional papers are sized. Otherwise, the color would simply sink in and disappear.
And shrink the paper, probably.
The paper what?
And would it cause the paper to shrink if it wasn't sized?
Well, yes, and you see, paper does shrink. Like, you can tape the paper down so that after you've painted on it, it starts contracting, you see, when it dries up, and so it'll come up tight theoretically if you have it taped down. Now, of course, a lot of people now, and it's a much better way, is they have a stapler. They go around and staple on the board. It makes it a little more difficult to take off, but it holds the paper better than the gum tape.
Have you always worked in watercolors?
Well, pretty much acrylic, except perhaps in doing some murals. I also have worked in, which I can't anymore because the guy who developed the technique is gone, but my friend Glenn Mitchell developed a way of painting on tile. This involved baking on a black, solid black mat on the tiles, and then he would put glazes on top of this black tile, and then he gave me color to put on the glazes. So then he'd cook it up, and there I'd have it. Now, that kind of thing is present at the there is one of these tile murals out on the county courthouse on Aquajito Road, and it's right there in the lobby, Carl the Net Menders.
I know that piece.
I think you've seen them. Also, I have, and I had more of it, I did a series of panels for Walt Pilot when he had the Pilot Market. It's now called Bruno's. Those were done actually in luminol. But I think at that time that might have been the origin of the idea of putting some sort of thing over each department to show what was being sold. I mean, Safeway and those other outfits now have these cutout things that they put over the different departments. But this was a very personalized sort of thing, and I think very effective. I'm sorry that successive changes in the ownership over there have resulted in my pure concept being adulterated. One by a couple of big things by Phil Nesbitt, and another by a mural. They hired somebody to paint down the end of the room.
What is it that you like about watercolor?
What do I like about it? Well, what I like about watercolors, Paul, in comparison with oil, for instance, or acrylic, as a matter of fact, is that watercolor is very easily transportable, and so are all the things that go along with it. Like, you can have a palette. Yes, I have a palette. I have a palette which was designed by Millard Cheats, of all people. I've had it for about 30 or 40 years. On the tubes of watercolor, in comparison with oil, certainly, or acrylic, can take up much less space. So the mechanics of getting the stuff together and doing the actual painting, I think, is much simpler in watercolor. Also, you paint on watercolor paper, painting on oil usually involves painting on stretched canvas, which is expensive. And, well, you can do it all right. Lots of people seem to have done it, but I think that one reason why watercolor has become more popular in the last 10 or 20 years is that particular ease. It's easy to get the material and easy to assemble the stuff, relatively so, in comparison with, getting canvases prepared and then the actual application of the oil paint, which may be interesting enough, working with a palette knife, which I have done, incidentally. But if you work with brushes, of course, then you get into cleaning brushes, and believe me, it's a lot harder to clean the oil out of a brush than it is to clean the watercolor.
Let me ask you to get on your soapbox here for a second, Sam, and talk about schlock art.
Schlock?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
subjects?
You see, in the beginning, why, Carmel Art Association was really one of the few galleries. There was a guy crossing the Pine Inn by the name of Smithson, and he had a gallery over there, and he had a pretty good eye. But somewhere along the line, this whole picture became corrupted, so people have a tendency, I think, to buy a stereotype or something they have seen before, rather than relying on their own eye and their own sensitivity, which might be all right too, except they just don't, for the most part, don't have the education for it, much less the eye. So you find a number of galleries in Carmel, in fact, a great number of them, that sell what I call schlock. I haven't seen, trying to remember my definition of schlock, and well, it's a certain certain relentless repetition of hackneyed images. That's my definition of schlock.
That's great. So what makes a piece of work not schlock?
Well, the artist's individual imagery come true, you see. If he paints, he may work with the same subject matter time and again, but usually he's trying to paint a different picture. I mean, it has just a different impact. Whereas there are a lot of people that, I say, the supreme schlockers, they may have 6 or 7 canvases lined up in the studio, and they're just go along and do a little bit on one, a little bit on another, kind of repeating what they've done already.
What would you say to a young person, say a person that's maybe in their late teens or early 20s, that says, I'm interested in a life in the arts, I think I'd like to be a painter. How do I go about getting started in it? What would you tell them?
Well, of course, you asked me that question, and really, I can't give you any kind of effective answer. I mean, like, you go boom, 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 you do this or that and the other thing, eventually you're going to become a successful artist. And it didn't used to work that way. Maybe it's working that way more now because of merchandising, why art has become a kind of commodity that gets sold by, for one thing, perhaps repetition of images, which is unfortunate, because most of the artists I know whose work I like, they may repeat combinations of things, but it's not a definite attempt to repeat. Whereas there are some, like all the repetitionists, I mean, they'll just repeat the same thing endlessly. Like Danny Garcia. Oh, what did I say?
Okay, well, I'm sure there's a lot of artists that do that sort of thing. But I mean, what would you tell a young person? Would you say, well, go to school? Would you say, learn techniques? Would you say, just get out there and paint what you feel? They're looking for some kind of direction. They don't know.
I know and as much as I have been teaching, I have a class every Thursday now. I've had one for I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years. So I have to have some sort of approach towards business of, toward helping people to learn how to draw and paint. I didn't really I did not do that myself. I had a few lessons in watercolor, maybe 2 or 3 from Paul Whitman. That was about it. The rest not the drawing, but the painting end of it, I developed by myself. The drawing I got, start in my study at St. Arch and also the Adult Education School in Long Beach.
3 or 4 years. And drink a lot of wine and hang out on the beach.
No, I don't. Yeah, that's very funny, but that's kind of disappeared. I think that one thing that not all artists have done this, but I think drawing is very important. So I think you learn how to draw to begin with, to set things down and say, it's not necessarily very heavy black and white, but say pencil and a white paper, that you begin to develop a kind of structure that way, so that it's kind of a skeleton that you hang the painting on, the drawing. Of course, as you look at my watercolors, you can see that drawing. I don't bother to erase the pencil lines. I used to do that, but then some people like those pencil lines in there. Now that really beginning, you can only get you need some drawing paper on a 314 barrel and a gum eraser, and get out there and do some drawing and sketching. Of course, you need to develop certain rendering techniques, which you can do by yourself, or else you can go to a class and some teacher will show you different ways to do that. You can work in charcoal, of course, with especially for life models, and that's the favorite medium, I guess, for life models. I don't use that anymore myself, but I used to do that a great deal.
Yeah, that's about all the questions that I have prepared, and I think it was a really good interview. Is there anything?
Well, fine.
Like to add?
Well, I haven't got anything particular to add, except that I will say to, so I said to several people, of course, that I'm the only person that they'll know who saw Buffalo Bill.
Tell me about seeing Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you about seeing Buffalo Bill. One day, my parents took me in hand, and we went down to the Capitol, which is in Denver. We went down to the Capitol building, and we stood in line with a lot of other people, and we walked up past Buffalo Bill's coffin. He was laid out in state there at the Capitol, and so we went by his coffin, and I must say, he looked great. And they took him and put him up on Lookout Mountain, which is near Denver, and Wyoming's been trying to get him back ever since.